Right, welcome everyone to our latest ALTA Insights webinar, where we focus on issues important to title and settlement professionals. I'm Jeremy Yohe, ALTA's Vice President of Communications, and today we've got a wonderful webinar lined up to discuss the election results and how they could impact the title industry and your business going forward. Before introducing today's speakers, I have a few housekeeping items to touch on. If you have a question during the webinar, please submit them in the questions box. We'll hold some time at the end for Q&A. Today's webinar is being recorded. You'll get a link to the recording tomorrow. And you also, in that email, you also get a link to access a copy of the presentation. In the meantime, you can download a PDF of the presentation in the GoToWebinar window pane. And that's actually, we have short housekeeping items today. So let me introduce today's speakers. First, we have Nathan Gonzales. Nathan is the editor and publisher of Inside Elections. This newsletter provides nonpartisan analysis of campaigns for Senate, House, Governor, and President. Supporters of TIPAC receive this newsletter, so you should be pretty familiar with this content. And Nathan has spoken to our industry in the past at our live events and our webinars. Also join us, we have several ALTA staff. First, we have Emily Tryon. Emily is ALTA's Vice President of Government Affairs, and among many things, provides strategic policy advice to the association's leadership, executive staff, and various departments. Not on camera, but he will join us during the Q&A. We also have Kevin Cameron. Kevin is Director of Federal Government Affairs for ALTA, and also joining us on ALTA staff is Leah Schimpf-Voss. Leah is Director of Grassroots and Political Affairs, with her primary focus directing ALTA's Political Action Committee, better known as TIPAC. Leah is going to kick us off, followed by Nathan, who will share his analysis, and then Emily will talk about some of ALTA's advocacy efforts and policies that impact your business. With that, Leah, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jeremy, and it's great to have so many folks on today's call. It's kind of hard to believe the election was a month ago, but there's been a lot going on since then, and Nathan will go through all the results pretty quick. There are over 70 new members of the House and Senate coming to Washington in January, and also a new presidential administration. And that means a lot of activity in DC. And it's the start of a new Congress, which means all the bills have to be reintroduced, and everything kind of starts over. So we'll also be seeing the president's nominees come before the Senate for confirmation. So it's going to be a really busy time, but it is also a really important time for ALTA members to establish and continue growing their relationships with members of Congress. Like I said, 70 new members, a lot of opportunities. Some of those folks were state legislators that you probably already know. So just want to encourage you all to, sign up for the e-newsletters of your members of Congress, your senator, and keep track of what's going on in DC that affects your business, but also where you're from. So also, if you are at your local Chamber of Commerce meeting or your kids' sports games and see these folks, go say hi, introduce yourself, tell them that you run a small business in your town, and that sort of thing. That's a great way to strike up a relationship. We call those relationships congressional liaisons. And if you are interested, please look on ALTA's website for more information. And in January, we'll be sending out a survey to see who knows who in Congress, and that we might call upon you to help us get some things done, because all the research that we've seen has shown that these kind of relationships, these grass tops relationships, are what help make members of Congress make up their minds on various issues. So please consider getting more involved in getting to know your member of Congress. It's super important, and I really look forward to your engagement in 2025. And now I'm going to kick it over to my friend Nathan Gonzales.
Yeah, thank you, Leah. And it's good to be with you all, even though I can't see you this time. It's always good when we do have those in-person opportunities, and hopefully we'll have those again. I'm clearly still in election mode since I'm sitting in my basement in a suit and tie, but that's all right. We take this is a classy operation over here. So I know that your time is valuable, so I want to make sure that I'm efficient with your time, and we'll try to run through what's happening. And all of the ballots are almost counted. As in case you didn't know, in California they apparently count one ballot per day, so they're still counting. We're curing some ballots in a key congressional race there, but we're almost done a month out. But the results are pretty clear, and we'll run through those. So let me. I'm going to start. I'm going to share my screen here. I assume everyone can see this full screen unless I hear otherwise. We've been calling this from the beginning the latest, most important election of our lives because we seem to do that every couple of years. And guess what? In 2026, it's also going to be an important election. But let's talk about what just happened in 2024 this November. Hold on one second. All right, gotta get control. All right, let's talk about the White House. Let's talk about some history that was made. Donald Trump elected president. He is the first person elected president after being defeated since Grover Cleveland. Grover Cleveland in the late 1800s was elected, defeated, and then elected again. Trump will be our 45th and our 47th president. Also, history was made. Trump is the oldest person we've ever elected president. He is older than what Biden was 4 years ago. So history, you can be the smartest person at your Christmas Eve service by knowing this information. Well, let's talk about the race that just happened in November. This should not have been a surprise. To me, that this election, Trump winning, this was not 2016 all over again. For those of you that have been reading the newsletter and following the race, you should. It looked like a very close race, particularly in 7 states. But we even wrote in early October about how it could look like a landslide, meaning one candidate could sweep the 7 toss-up states, and in that it could feel like a landslide, even though it was a fairly close election. And that's what ended up happening. Trump won with 312 electoral college votes. You can see, put that in perspective a little bit, slightly more than what Biden received 4 years ago, and then what Trump did himself 8 years ago, to kind of put that in perspective. So I guess I've been living through 8 years of 2016. What did it all mean, and how big of a surprise that was? And to me, 2024, what just happened was not in that category. Trump winning was always a distinct possibility, and Trump ended up winning. What was and these are the toss-ups. These are how well Trump did, or the 2 candidates did, in the toss-up states. You can see that he swept all 7 of them. I would say that there was a surprise in some of the margins. I think Arizona being wider than what it was a surprise. But by and large, this was not out of the realm of possibility heading into the election. To me, what was a surprise was the national popular vote. Trump is going to finish ahead in the national popular vote narrowly by about 1.5%, 1.5 points. 50% is rounding up. He actually just finished just below 50%. But this is the first time that a Republican has finished ahead in the national popular vote in 20 years. 20 years being the George W. Bush's reelection in 2004. 2004 was also a big year because that was the year that Nicolas Cage stole the Declaration of Independence in order to preserve it. So that was also a big year there. But going back, that to me, Trump's win in the national popular vote was the surprise. That the sort of the breadth of Trump's victory was not something that was foreseen, but because it had been so long since a Republican had finished ahead. And a natural question would be, well, what voter demographics, who did Trump do best with, or what demographics did he do well with in order to win both the Electoral College and finish ahead in the national popular vote? And it was a lot. He did better than what he did 4 years ago among 18 to 29-year-olds, 30 to 44-year-olds, 44 to 50 to 64-year-olds, married voters, not married voters, Republicans, independents, black voters, Latino voters, Asian voters. Um, we keep going, men, women, white evangelicals, black men, Latino women, no college degree, union households, non-union households, voters making less than $100,000. A lot. His ability to improve his margins, either his winning margins or decreasing his losing margins with Harris, not only helped propel him to victory, but also helped him finish ahead in the national popular vote. And the national popular vote, of course, that's not how we elect a president. But I think that should be sobering for some Democrats, because some Democrats were frustrated, and I think there was a sense of pride about how they were consistently finishing ahead in the national popular vote, even though sometimes they lost in the electoral college, such as in 2016. And there was a sense of that was always inevitable. The Democrats were always going to finish ahead in the popular vote, and that this election showed that simply was not the case. And so when you hear Republicans talking about mandates, and we'll talk about that in a second. I think it's that coupling of finally winning the electoral college with the national popular vote and putting those two together. So, I think there's been a pause from the Democratic side on wanting to move away from the electoral college and going toward a national popular vote, because this election showed that's not always going to be in Democrats' favor. And that should be a lesson that if you're working to try to change the rules of the game or change the rules of our elections, that you should be willing to play by the rules even when political circumstances change. So some of you who are Democrats out there say, all right, give me something here. What voter groups did Harris do better with? And this is the slide. No, it's not completely blank. There are a few groups, voters 65 and older, black women, Democrats, college graduates, and voters making more than $100,000. That's it. Those are the demographics, and these are according to the exit polls. Now, if we really want to dig into the weeds a little bit, because you probably hear some of this information, you read about it other places, or you see it on TV. And there are actually two sets of exit polls. The information that I'm laying out for you is from the exit poll that's conducted by a group called Edison Research, and it is paid for by CNN, ABC, CBS, and NBC. Kind of called the Media Consortium. So that's one exit poll. But there's another exit poll that is paid for by Fox, the Wall Street Journal, and the Associated Press. They're similar, but they don't always agree. And some of that is because these are still polls. These are polls that are conducted with a much broader, a larger sample size. But I guess I present that information to you because so much stock is put in these results, because it's one of the only and best ways that we have to try to learn how voters voted the way they did, and who voted, and how they voted. But these are not exact. This is not gospel. This is not the exact site. These are still polls. And again, there are two different sets of exit polls. So, yeah, the challenge for one of the challenges for Harris was that these groups that you see on the screen, she did not improve compared to Biden 4 years ago among these groups with as big of margins as what Trump improved with among those groups that we saw on the previous slide. Let me try to give you a couple examples here. I'm looking at my notes. I don't have all these numbers committed to memory quite yet. All right, let's take voters with a college degree. In 2020, Biden won voters with a college degree by 12 points. Harris won them by 13 points this time around. So that was an improvement. But let's take another group, for example. Let's take Latinos in general, both men and women. Biden won Latino voters by 33 points in 2020. Harris won them by six. These are and you know, that's just two examples of where again, Harris's improvement with some groups was not enough to balance out losses among other groups. And so those are kind of who voted and how they voted and some of the trends that we saw there. But a natural question is why or what was the what was the deciding factor? And I'm not a believer that there was one that there was one significant factor, particularly when we're talking about an election where Trump sort of again that that breadth and depth of his victory. But I will say that I think I underestimated the the power of the mood of the country, meaning a majority of Americans believing that the country is headed off on the wrong track, a majority of the Americans believing that the economy is not in good shape. uh, I will say that, and Harris's connection to the current administration. I mean, she is a part of the current administration, being the vice president, but voters holding her and the entire Democratic leadership responsible for the mood and the direction of the country, the strength of the economy. I think that made it very challenging for her. There might be some people who are blaming Harris as a candidate, and sure, she's not the perfect candidate. There isn't one. She didn't run a perfect campaign, but uh, before the election, she was raising a ton of money. The Democratic get out the vote operation appeared to be in full force, and it was not enough to get the job done. And so that's why I think the Democrats should be doing a little bit of soul searching as they with this loss and Trump's victory. Now, when we talk about, hold on, I'm going to see here. Wait 1 second. All right, before we get to the fight for Congress, let's talk about the kind of moving ahead, because we're at a stage right now where we have to listen to each party to determine what they think happened in the election. Right? How do they process the results? I can tell you what I think. I told you what I think. One of the big factors, but how do they process the results? Because that is going to dictate their future behavior. So let's take this in on each side, the two parties. Who do Democrats blame, or what do Democrats blame on their losses? It appears to me that at least initially, Democrats aren't really quite sure what happened. I think Biden is getting a lot of blame, both for sort of the direction of the country and his unpopularity, not dropping out before and giving Democrats more time to sort through a primary, which I'm of a mixed. I think having an open primary would have probably pushed candidates even further to the left, and I'm not sure that would have really helped. But I think Biden is getting some of the blame. But it does not appear that there's a consensus, and so. But who Democrats blame, or if they blame it on issues, that is going to matter to who they look to lead the party in the future. Or does the party have to change their stances on policy issues? I think the Democratic Party should be having this time of soul searching where they look disconnected from a majority of Americans, or reality, whether it is on economic issues or social issues, or security issues, whatever it might be, that the Democratic Party looks like, has the perception or the brand right now that they are not in tune with the majority of Americans. And so I think Democrats they should address that. But their desire to address it will only depend on how much they think that factored into their losses. Now, on the Republican side, it is going to be, we have to listen to what they think as well. And it's clear they think they have a mandate. President-elect Trump on Wednesday morning, right, election night, Wednesday morning, he said, voters have given us a powerful and unprecedented mandate. And this is what parties do all the time. But what does that mean? Because I don't think that um, this election was necessarily that voters really know what mass deportation looks like, or that they wanted, Matt Gaetz to be Attorney General. I know he's not in the running anymore. But I don't think that's not really what the election was about. I think the election was more about that refutation of the current state of the country and Democrats being in charge, rather than voters being in love with everything Trump said and all these policies that Republicans want to implement. But if that's what Republicans think voters want, then they're going to push push for that, and we'll see how voters react. We'll have another election in 2 years, midterm election, and if voters think the Republicans went too far, then there will be a backlash against Republicans in that respect. And one of the key things that I'm looking for, and one of the things that we're hearing about, is that there are a lot of Republicans who believe that Trump has ushered in an entirely new coalition or a reforming of the two parties. That now the Republican Party is the diverse, populist, blue collar, working class party, and that is the new normal. And while this coalition was more diverse than a previous Republican presidential coalitions, I'm not convinced it's a complete reforming of the two parties. I think that a lot of it still has to do with Trump, a gravitation, an attraction or magnetism that Trump has, that we're convincing particularly some Latino men, to a lesser extent African American men, to give Republicans or give him a chance. So what am I saying? I guess I'm saying that I want to see an election. We'll have 2026 when Trump won't be on the ballot, and we'll see if that same coalition turns out for other random Republicans, or in the future when Trump isn't even around, what does that coalition look like? Because I think what we've seen in the past is that when other Republican politicians try to be Trump or look like Trump, then it just doesn't work. Nothing compares to the original, and these other people, they look meaner, they look silly. It doesn't work. So I'm skeptical that this is a true reforming of the two parties. And I'll go back one point before we talk about the Senate and the House. I promise we'll talk about those. Is that before we got to election day, Trump won a very important argument, and that is, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And the majority of Americans said yes. Oh, no, majority of Americans said, no, I'm not better off now than I was 4 years ago. I'm worse off now. And I would argue there's a little bit of a sense of either revisionist history or collective amnesia about where we were 4 years ago, because 4 years ago from this fall, we were in a pre-vaccine COVID environment. Unemployment was at 6.7%. The economy was not particularly strong. I know it was different in different places around the country, but I don't know that anyone at the time was labeling that economy as strong. And yet, voters think differently about that time now. Voters think more fondly. They don't think it was really that bad compared to where we are now. And that was a critical, I think, argument that Trump won before voters even started voting, and was important as voters started voting. So. And Trump continues to benefit from this perception or image of being an outsider and a businessman, and he's a celebrity and he's successful, and it's not necessarily a fair reality. It's a way. I mean, he's been a politician. He's been running for office for 9 years now, but that perception that he is not a politician, he gets the benefit of the doubt over anyone else who is a politician or is part of government, because voters have such a low view of government and politicians in general, that he is held to a different standard compared to anyone else. And he benefits from that, continues to benefit from that dynamic. Okay, let's keep going. Let's talk about the fight for Congress. A little bit of history in Congress. Next year, on the left is Angela Alsobrooks of Maryland. On the right, Lisa Blunt Rochester of Delaware. Next year will be the first time that two Black women will serve in the U.S. Senate together at the same time. So some history made. And in the House, Sarah McBride of Delaware will be the first transgender member of Congress. Now, McBride, if I'm allowed a dad joke, but it was McBride's joke that there will also be with Democrat Derek Tran winning in California, in an Orange County district in California's 45th district. McBride and Tran together mean there will be two Trans in Congress next year. I'll just let that settle there, and I assume that everyone is rolling in laughter. All right, the Senate, the current Senate is 51-49 for Democrats. The Senate next year is going to be 53-47 for Republicans. This should not have been a surprise at all. This was one of the things, Republicans gaining Senate seats was one of the most certain things heading into Election Day. Our pre-election projection was that Republicans would gain between 2 and 4 Senate seats, and Republicans won 4 seats. West Virginia was in the bag for a year in terms of gains. John Tester in Montana was in deep trouble. He ended up losing. Sherrod Brown in Ohio lost. The one I would say surprise, or the one Senate race that broke against our ratings, we had Pennsylvania rated as tilt Democratic, and that ended up going for Republican Republican Dave McCormick, who defeated Bob Casey Jr. These are the list of the new Democratic and Republican senators. I apologize for that typo, new Republicans senators. That doesn't make sense, but I'm still catching up on my sleep. And if you wonder what these senators-elect look like, you'll see there Democrats on the top row, Republicans on the bottom. Again, this should not have been a surprise. And I've been doing elections long enough, and some projections, some cycles are better than others, but this was well within what was expected. Now, it came close because of Trump's overperformance. Republicans almost gained 2 or 3 more. I mean, Trump almost pulled the Michigan Senate seat, the Nevada Senate seat, even the Arizona Senate seat. He almost pulled those as well. And so if Republicans had gained 7 seats, I mean, that would have been huge, and that would have been much more of a surprise than what the range that we had now. Now, the Senate margin matters now or for next year because we're talking about control of the Senate, but it also matters for 2026 in terms of how likely is it that Democrats, or how easy would it be for Democrats to get those seats, to get back into the control? And it is going to be difficult, is the short answer. Even though midterm elections tend to be poor for the president's party, there just aren't a lot of opportunities for Democrats to win seats. Susan Collins in Maine, the only senator up for election in a state that Harris won this time around. Tom Tillis in North Carolina could be vulnerable in a great Democratic year. And then the list of opportunities gets much, I guess it's not longer. The list doesn't get longer, but the longer shots at winning. For example, in Ohio and Florida, there will be replacement appointed senators that may or may not run for election, but those seats, and then the ones I didn't list are Alaska and Iowa and Texas. And these are not great Democratic opportunities. So not only did Republicans win the majority this year, but they might have done it with a strong enough margin, with enough of a margin in terms of number of seats in order to hold the majority next year. And I should say, I know that you all are more normal than I am, that in the Senate, if there is a vacancy, there can be an appointed senator, usually by the governor, who then will serve until the next election, when there will be a special election. That is different than the House, which we'll get to in a second, where there cannot be appointments, that those seats are vacant until a special election is held in order to fill those seats. So I put that, we'll put that out there. All right, let's talk about the House. I know we have time for questions and some other info in this. In the House also fell within our pre-election projections. What happened in the House should not have been a surprise. It looked like a close race, a close fight for the majority, and that's what it ended up being. Democrats are likely going to gain 1 seat. There is one race in California, Northern California, in the 13th district, where the Democrat is leading, but it's still officially uncalled. It's with, I think the margin is 138 votes right now, and that will likely hold up, but it's not completely done. If that stays the way it is, it'll be D+1. Our pre-election range was R+1 to D+5, D+9 seats. And this result even falls into what our range was back in, I want to say June, when it was R+5 to D+5. And that range adjusted as we got closer to election day. But what happened in the House should not have been a surprise. Democrats gained 1, they needed to gain 4. And so the next Congress is likely to be, the current Congress is 221 to 214. It's likely to be 220 to 215. That matters for a couple reasons. In the near term, that means it is going to be very difficult for Speaker Mike Johnson next year. He has such a narrow majority, and it's going to be even more narrow than what you see because of those vacancies, because of Trump taking some House members and wanting to put them into his cabinet, specifically Congresswoman Elise Stefanik of New York, Congressman Mike Waltz of Florida, and Gaetz, even though he's not in the running for AG anymore. He still resigned his seat, so that's a vacancy. So that is 3 seats down. So that's 217 to 215 to start the next Congress. And those special elections, it'll be at least a couple of months before those are filled. So basically, that means that in order to get something passed, all Republicans are going to have to vote for that legislation or get help from Democrats. And we have seen in the past that sometimes it's hard for Republicans to get all on the same page, even within their own party. And so that will be something to watch heading into next year. These are our pre-election ratings. I guess I'll say that our pre-election ratings, I am proud of what we did. Every race, there were only 4 races, and they were all in our tilt Democratic category that went to Republicans. But out of the other, so the 435 minus 4 was 431 minus the 8 seats we have in toss-up. So that's what, 422. 422 races that we rated pre-election. The winning party won those races. The party that we thought was going to win won those races. And so these were, and this is based on data, and polling is still kind of a precarious and imperfect tool, but that's what helped lead to these lead to the ratings and to the correct results. I'll say that I guess there's been a little bit of talk of, because Harris didn't win and maybe did poor, didn't do as well as expected, that, well, what if Biden had stayed in the race? And I think it would have been an epic disaster for Democrats. Republicans, there would have been a significant wave that would have hit the House. I mean, the Senate, Republicans would have won even more Senate seats. Republicans would have added to their House majority by probably a couple of dozen or more seats in the House if Biden had stepped aside. So even though Harris lost, I think she helped keep Democrats in the game and at least competitive, particularly heading to a midterm election where the ink is barely dry on 2024. I think Democrats are the early favorites to win control of the House in 2026. We'll see. Obviously, a long way to go. But just looking at historical midterm trends where the president's party usually loses at least a few seats, and Republicans only having a 3-seat margin in the House, I think Democrats they at least start in good shape heading into the midterm elections. We don't have. I know we gotta. I'm gonna wrap this up in just a couple minutes. This candidate, I don't know if you remember the backstory on this, but in the middle, his name, Derek Anderson, who ran in Virginia's 7th district, one of the 8 toss-up districts in the country. He put this photo out before the election, among other photos and videos, to try to get outside groups to help. And anyway, this is not his family, if you don't remember the story. Well, this is his friend's wife and his friend's kids, and he kind of got some negative press or negative attention for it, and he ended up losing in one of the most competitive races in the country. I'm not sure that it was only because of this, but I know talking to some Democrats as this was unfolding, they were grateful because Anderson is a military veteran and was a pretty good candidate. They didn't have a lot to go at on him, not a lot of opposition research, but the ability to paint him as inauthentic and who does he, who is the real Derek Anderson, and kind of put together this narrative, I think was a factor. And it's amazing to me. I've never seen a candidate do this before, where in this way, kind of pose with a family who is not his at all. Fight in the states, very limited action and change in governors races. It was 27 Republicans, 23 Democrats before and after the election. A majority doesn't really matter. Because it's not a legislature, but I put those for you. These are the new Republican and Democratic governors. Kelly Ayotte, you probably remember that name, former U.S. Senator from New Hampshire, is now going to be the governor from New Hampshire, replacing Chris Sununu. We don't have to go through these unless you want to come back to them. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Before I turn this back over to you, Jeremy, let me just make one point. We go through cycles, right? If you're and this is a message to both Republicans and Democrats who are on, that for Republicans, like Republicans had a very good election, right? Won the presidency, won the Senate, still held the House. Like this is the Republicans' time to shine, so to speak, or to have that opportunity in Washington, D.C. And Democrats are searching, right? We've talked about this, but what I've been doing this for a little bit more than, well, maybe even more than 20 years now, and we have determined or declared the end of each political party, I think multiple times in my time of doing this. And right now, we're like, well, Democrats, they're never going to win again. How did they lose to Trump? This is, it's over. And usually, right when we do that, then party that's in power gets into power, overreaches. Voters say, no, 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 that's not what we wanted. That was way too far. We need to get some of the other party back into power in order to be a check and balance. And we go through these cycles. And so again, Republicans, this is your time. This is your opportunity. Democrats, yeah, it doesn't feel good, right? But there are cycles, and I think that Democrats will have an opportunity down the line, down the line period. So I'm going to pause, Jeremy,
right.
and take it away.
All right, well, Nathan, so what you're saying is politics and elections are very like the real estate market. They're cyclical.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
Well, thanks for that analysis. If you don't mind, if you want to hang out with us for a little bit, we got some time at the end for Q&A. Yeah, we do have some time we want to talk about. Okay, we have the results. We have new people in Congress, new president. How does that impact the title insurance industry? Before we get to Emily, we have a quick poll question we wanted to ask everyone. As we move into 2025, what's the top issue that you believe could impact your business? And if you don't mind, just pick one real quick. We got about 10 more seconds. We'll close it. That way we can get back into the content. All right, I'm going to close it. Looks like we got about 30% say FinCEN. Let me share this real quick. Everyone can see it. 28% when I closed it. FinCEN followed by title alternatives, AOLs. Actually, no, that went ahead. Sorry, it was changing quickly. And then the title waiver pilot program, and then privatization of Fannie and Freddie bringing up the rear there. So Emily, interesting. We've been talking about AOLs, title alternatives, the title pilot, it seems like for a while now, and it looks like we'll probably continue to be focusing on that and protecting what we have continued to say is title insurance is the best option to protect property rights. Emily, I'll turn it over to you to get into, oh, I don't want to do that, I almost canceled the webinar. Talk about, the issues, policies that we'll be focusing on in 2025.
Thank you, Jeremy. And I want to first of all thank Nathan for a great overview of kind of what has happened and kind of where we are today on a more macro level. If we really drill down a little bit more and focus on kind of how does all of this affect ALTA and our advocacy efforts, I think that there are two particular committees that jump out that we spend a lot of time, Kevin and I, on the Hill talking to folks, one being Senate Banking and the other House Financial Services. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about how kind of the changes in these committees will potentially have some impact on how we can move forward with things like the alternatives and the title waiver pilot and some of those things that we've been working so hard on over the last, handful, like year and a half, 2 years. So with regard to Senate Banking, Senator Tim Scott will be the new chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, he was ranking member, and so moving into the chairman slot, he will have a little bit more, he'll have more power on what hearings happen and then kind of the priorities of the committee, which will be interesting for us. We do have some great congressional liaison relationships and relationships within that office, which is very helpful. One of the things that is very interesting and a lot of conversation here in DC and kind of all over the country right now with regard to financial services and banking type issues is that Elizabeth Warren is going to be the ranking member of that committee. And as many of you know, she has a history of having some very strong opinions. And so we will spend a lot of time trying to figure out exactly how to figure all of those challenges out, but it will be an exciting challenge for us to work through, not just ALTA or title insurance or real estate, but just in general as banking and financial services industry. There will be a lot of potentially open spots on the committee. It looks to be probably as many as 10 new members of the Senate Banking Committee, a handful on each side, which will create a lot of new opportunity to really talk to new folks and get some new excitement around our issues. And so we're excited about that. On the House Financial Services Committee side, things are also changing. Patrick McHenry has decided to retire, so he will no longer be the chairman of the committee. There are 3 to 4 members kind of running for that position right now. We are hoping and anticipate hearing more next week. Some of the leadership elections are supposed to be happening next week, and hopefully we'll have kind of some more clarity as to who will be leading that committee, and it will then give us more understanding as to who will be kind of in the roles of the subcommittees and kind of what that looks like. Waters will remain as ranking member. On this committee, there looks to be quite a few new members as well, maybe not as many as Senate Banking, but quite possibly would be as many. I think that there are a lot of folks looking to kind of check out new opportunities, especially, and I will get to this as we look at having some sort of a tax reform package out there. I think some of those tax writing committees are becoming very, very interesting to folks. So we will see how many new members we have in that space, but again, it gives us a great opportunity to really spread our message and really talk to new and additional folks. On the regulatory front, a new administration means a lot as well. We will have a new FHFA director, and that will have a definite impact on things like the title waiver pilot and some of the other rules and regulations that have been coming out of FHFA. There will be a new CFPB director, so the conversation around junk fees is something that people are anticipating will change a bit in the coming months into next year. And many other agencies will have new leadership, and then it'll start to trickle down, and we will have a better understanding, in the coming weeks and months as to kind of what those people, who gets into those positions and what their opinions and kind of where their priorities lie. One of the things that I mentioned a little bit earlier that I think is really important for us to think about as an industry and as ALTA and members of ALTA is, what are the things that we see coming up next year that we need to be prepared for and start really thinking about. And the first thing that comes to mind is during reconciliation, we very much anticipate some sort of a tax package. That, was a fight that occurred a handful of years ago, and we will continue to have those conversations. This is something that we've spent some time on the Government Affairs Committee at ALTA talking about. We have a working group on this issue and really are looking to really figure out what those specific tax-related issues are that ALTA and title insurance members really want to focus on. And so we are really focusing in on that and would love anyone's thoughts and ideas on that, because we want to make sure that we get up and run on that right away, because we anticipate that will happen pretty quickly in the new year. Another interesting piece that has been coming out over the last couple of weeks post the election is the conversations around the potential of GSE reform and even more ending GSE conservatorship. The GSEs have been under conservatorship for almost 15 years, so there is kind of a conversation and understanding of, is this something that needs to be addressed? And I think there'll be a lot of conversation in that space, which will obviously have a very direct impact on our businesses. And so really getting out there, having the conversations, meeting with folks, and really understanding who gets into these positions like at FHFA really will help us better understand and better kind of fight the challenges ahead in those spaces. I would also just mention briefly, we still have a handful of weeks left in this year. There are a few things that are kind of must do's that we are focusing on. One of them is some sort of continuing resolution extending government funding. Currently, government funding expires on the 20th, so in a couple of weeks. We anticipate a short-term extension. It'll be into next year is the most likely scenario, but at this point, it's not entirely clear exactly how long that will be. There's also, conversation around the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill expires on December 31st, and there needs to be some sort of path forward to extend and move forward some of those pieces. And then NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, does need to be addressed by the end of the year. One of the other things that has come up is that the president has asked for disaster relief. It's not clear whether or not that will get included in any of these must-pass pieces of legislation, but most likely it'd be included in a continuing resolution as it has to do with funding and dollars. So I think from kind of where we stand, those are just the big high-level pieces that really impact ALTA and our advocacy efforts, but I am happy to answer any questions when we move into that space, and I know Kevin will also join us for any questions as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Emily. So not much to deal with here before the end of the year, right? Not at all. As we mentioned, we do have some time for questions, Q&A. So if you have anything you'd like to ask the experts here, now's your chance. We have had a couple of questions already come in, Emily, about the pilot. You'd mentioned we've got to wait and see who the new director of the FHFA will be. Any thoughts on kind of, new administration, where we may go from where we were under Biden?
Yeah, I would say that we anticipate that and hope that there will be a slowdown, if not a halt, to the pilot program. Of course, we don't know who those people are, and we can't say this is for certain, but this pilot program has been, there have been a lot of Republicans, a lot of Democrats as well, but a lot of folks have really painted this as something that was part of the Biden administration. And so if that is, being it was in the State of the Union and whatnot, if that is the way it, you expect it to continue, you would expect there to be a focus in that space. I would say, Representative Mark Alford from Missouri did an op-ed today asking for the stopping of the pilot. So I think that there's momentum there, and we are excited about that.
Yeah, could you share with everyone who's on, who is Alford and what group he leads and why that was important?
Absolutely. So he is one of the founding members of the Real Estate Caucus. So the Real Estate Caucus is about 50 some members on the House side. It's a bipartisan group. It's very evenly split. It's run by 4 different members. He is one of those folks, and they have come together and sent a letter to FHFA asking them to stop the pilot. And kind of in addition to that, Representative Alford asked if he could do an op-ed, and together we helped him with some of the language, but he really championed this and has been a real strong advocate for us and really wants to get out there and spread the word that this is in fact a problem. He has real estate background in his past, so he's very passionate about it.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Emily. A question on the bill that ALTA had supported on the protecting America's property rights. What happens to that bill in maybe next year, if it could be reintroduced?
Yeah, so at the end of the Congress, all bills go away. You have to reintroduce bills at the beginning of a new Congress. And so I think that goes to the conversation about, what do we see as potentials for conversations in this space in the next year. And if we're talking about GSE reform, this is the kind of conversation that this bill would be a part of. One of the things that I think is interesting about the bill is, some folks have said that this really is the beginning of GSE reform. So for us to be able to get that marker out there before we go into a year like next year where there could be or potentially will be conversations at least about that, I think is a real strong stance for us. And I'm really proud of the fact that we have that marker out there and we have so many bipartisan champions on that. So that's where we are. We anticipate finding, an opportunity to get this reintroduced and really look to see what that will be. But we will spend some time in the early part of the year really making sure that what we introduce is the right piece of legislation, and really is something that will be strongly considered if and when GSD reform moves forward, or if we can get it done on its own, that will always be something that we push for as well.
Yeah, and this push, and Leah mentioned it before, it involves everyone in this call, it involves more of the industry getting involved and letting us know about the relationships that you may have, or your friends or family may have. Leah, how does someone go about letting us know? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. They can just email one of us. It's that simple. Just let us know who you know. We got an email from somebody in Michigan yesterday about a meeting with their congressman. So just email anybody on the government affairs team the information, and we will make sure we have a record of it.
Yeah, and if they want to set up a meeting with their member of Congress back home, we help facilitate that, correct?
Yeah. Yes, I will help you get in touch with them, send a meeting invite. We would arrange a prep call ahead of time so you know exactly what's going on at that time in Congress, if we have a bill ready to go, if not, that sort of thing. But the main idea is to make sure these members of Congress understand your business and what you do for consumers every day, so that when something does come across their desk about title insurance, they can say, oh, but I met with the title agent in my hometown. I should call them before I make a decision on this. So that's the whole idea.
Yep. All right, so get out there, let us know. Let's keep building those relationships. Emily, a couple more questions, and hey everyone, Nathan's here, he's hanging out. Let's get some questions, from the election results. Real quick, Nathan, I live in Ohio. Sherrod Brown, maybe a little more color on the result of Marino taking down Sherrod Brown.
Yeah, I think Sherrod Brown obviously has a track record of getting elected statewide in Ohio many times, even before the Senate, getting elected Secretary of State. The challenge is fundamentally, he is still a Democrat in a state that keeps trending further and further toward Republicans. So, the senators are only up every 6 years. And so each cycle just kept getting tougher and tougher. And 6 years ago, when he faced Congressman Jim Renacci, Renacci was not a particularly good candidate. I apologize if his cousin is on this call, but he didn't raise a lot of money. He didn't have a lot of support, and Brown was able to not only win but outspend him, by millions and millions of dollars. Republicans this cycle decided we are going to win Montana and Ohio, and they committed from the beginning that they were going to spend whatever it took to win those two races, because they knew that even if Trump didn't win the race, that he was going to win Montana and Ohio. And ultimately, I think Brown, Harris, or whoever the Democrat at the top of the ticket was going to be, Harris lost Ohio by too big of a margin for Brown to overcome. He did get some crossover voters. He overperformed Harris because he's Sherrod Brown, but it was just too deep of a hole. And ultimately that helped Bernie Moreno get, over the top and pull that seat into the Republican column.
Yeah. The spend was definitely big in Ohio. So I couldn't even hide from the advertisements on Hulu or whatever service I wanted to be on.
Well, and I'll give you one quick thing, because I know we have other important questions, that football was the prime place where the campaigns and the candidates wanted to be, because if you're watching other shows, you could be anywhere, right? You're on Hulu, Netflix, Roku, whatever it might be. You're hard to find, but the campaigns and the parties know that if you want to watch football, you've got to be on one channel at one time. They know where to get you. They know where to get those eyeballs. And so if you were watching football over the last 3 months in a swing state, you were just getting crushed with ads.
Even on Amazon Prime, where I think it was the Thursday night games, I think maybe, but the advertisements were there too. All right, Emily, FinCEN, any thoughts on, from ALTA's perspective, where this may go? we got a December implementation deadline, and it's for all cash transactions across this country. Basically extending the GTOs. Thoughts on what you're hearing in regards to this?
Yeah, I think that the way we kind of have laid this out, there are a lot of unknowns. So we don't know who will be in all of these different positions at FinCEN, or who will be running particular committees on financial services or banking, who might have some interest in looking back on some of the stuff that has happened in the past. But I will tell you that I think that it's in our best interest to continue to move forward and really look through what we need to get done as the December implementation dates come into effect, because those obviously will be before the end of the year, and those are things that just need to be continued to review and look at and be prepared for, because at this point we don't anticipate a ton of changes in that space. But when we see some of these other seats being filled, and there could be some folks that really have differing opinions on how some of this stuff should happen, and at that point then we would see what they have to say and have those conversations. But really, I think moving forward, we anticipate things to be very similar to the same until we know more.
Yep, and we'll continue to provide education for all the industry to learn what the rule requires. We actually have a webinar next week, to go over the rule and the requirements. So if you're interested in learning more about that and what that will entail of your company to comply, I encourage you to register for that webinar next week. Probably, Emily, a similar answer to this question. Obviously, previous administration, trying to address the affordable housing issue, and they threw out title insurance as eliminated title insurance as an option. We know that's not, an answer. But maybe you could talk about some of the ideas that the Trump administration has, tossed out there as far as, construction or addressing mortgage rates, anything that you've heard from how Trump will address affordable housing.
Yeah, one of the things that I will say is there has been a lot of conversation about affordable housing throughout the past couple of years, and continues to be a conversation on the campaign, and as we look into what next year looks like. I think it's really important for us all to take a step back and be very proud of where we are as an industry versus where we were a year or two ago. Yes, originally we were on the list of things that, we were a junk fee, we were this, we were that, we were all these different challenges, and we were, people couldn't buy a home because title insurance was too expensive, all these different things. And we really have done a very, very good job of explaining what we do, why title insurance is important, what the protections are, why all of these things are necessary in buying a new home. So I think that with all of that information out there, I think that it has become more and more challenging on a bipartisan level for folks to single us out and attack us directly. That being said, one of the things, as I mentioned before, that is now being talked about that I think is something we need to really think about is, what does GSE reform look like, and what does conservatorship or lack of conservatorship look like for our industry? And I think that is, in fact, the most kind of important piece for us to be thinking about as an industry right now. Once people get into place, people start having meetings, and we have more information about what priorities come out specifically from the different agencies, we'll have a better understanding. But I think that for us really is the issue to be thinking about.
Yep. All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour. Nathan, any parting words? I really liked your slide, your lead slide, crossing off the year, the most important election ever. So, any thoughts, kind of looking into 2025, on how that's all going to play out?
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be really because of the narrow margins in the Senate and the House. It is really going to empower a lot of individual people, and you have a mix of people some people who are going to be looking ahead to their reelection. They want to be around let's talk about Republicans first. They want to be supportive of Trump and be a good Republican, but they also want to win. And some of them are in competitive districts that it's going to be, midterms could be tough for them. You have a group of senators who probably aren't going to be around much longer. Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, or Susan Collins, she says she's planning to run, I think is the language. I'm not sure, convinced she's definitely going to run, but there are some members who they just may be sort of free spirits about not necessarily having to vote the party line, because if they aren't planning to be around, they're going to vote more of their conscience. So I think that legislatively, it's going to be that we're talking about very tight margins, and very quickly the page is going to turn to what does the midterm look like. And I think the House is going to be a prime focus of, over the next year and a half, once we get past this initial legislative honeymoon.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you for your time and sharing your analysis and expertise in this. And thank you for your newsletter you put together. Great summary and synopsis of what's going on. Emily, thank you for your time. Also, Leah, again, everyone on the call, if you're not a liaison, we need to get you involved, get you more involved. Member of the Tidal Action Network, that's definitely a great starting point there. It's free. Connect you with your member of Congress and help push the cause forward. Want to encourage you to continue to pay attention to Diane Tom, ALTA CEO, her weekly update that goes out, keep you informed on all of our advocacy efforts. And pay attention to the webinars like these that will continue to hold throughout the upcoming year. With that, just a reminder, you'll get an email tomorrow with a link to the webinar recording and a PDF of today's presentation. And with that, that will bring us to the conclusion of today's presentation. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.